Hi, my name's Alex Dolphin, and welcome back to another episode of Ex Ante. Today we're going to discuss the case Unocal versus Mesa. This case was heard in the Supreme Court of Delaware in the year 1985. Let's go ahead and jump into the facts of the case. So both Unocal and Mesa are oil companies. They are oil corporations in 1985. Unocal is now a part of Chevron, so it's been merged into that company. It's part of that large oil company. Mesa Petroleum is now owned by a private equity firm. But what's important is who owned Mesa Petroleum at the time of this case. And so I want to give you that as a little bit of background. Mesa Petroleum is owned by a character named Boone Pickens. Boone Pickens, he passed away just a couple of years ago, but he is essentially known as a corporate raider in the 1980s. What corporate raiders were known for was kind of taking over companies. They had these methods where they would go ahead and, offer stockholders money, take over these companies. Maybe they strip their assets and sell them off and make a lot of money off this type of practice. So Boone Pickens is known as a corporate raider. He's also known as a green mailer. Well, so what's a green mailer? Well, a green mailer, kind of like blackmail, and that's someone who essentially will buy up a lot of stock in a company and then will basically loom the threat of a takeover over the board and say, hey, you know what, buy this stock back from me at a premium and I won't take over your company, essentially. So Boone Pickens, he's a wheeling and dealing guy from Texas that wants to try and make some money off some corporations. Well, Boone Pickens sees Unocal and he's like, you know what, let's see what we can do with that. And so Boone, through Mesa, begins to say, let's try and buy out Unocal. Okay, so their offer to the Unocal stockholders is a tender offer, is essentially going to say, we'll pay you, $50 to $55 per share for the first people that sell us their shares, right? So right now, they need, 50% of the company to essentially take it over, right? And so right now they have a smaller share, roughly 13% before Boone begins his tender offer. Well, essentially he's going to say, I'm going to buy 37% with cash. I'm going to give the first 37% of the stockholders of Unocal, I'm going to give them cash, and they'll get to sell and go away happily. But whoever doesn't come in that first 37%, so whoever doesn't come to me quickly, they're going to get a bond in the new corporation, which is kind of junk bonds. That's what it's been referred to throughout the case, meaning it's garbage debt, unsecured debt, which means in a bankruptcy, you're not going to get anything, essentially. So what does this make the people that are holding Unocal want to do? Well, they're going to want to tender their stock quickly and take the cash from Boone Pickens. Well, the board of Unocal doesn't really like that, right? They're like, what should we do about this? Well, let's see if we can figure out a way to get Boone out of the picture and, put a wall around our company and essentially keep control of it. And so they go and talk to some investment bankers at Goldman Sachs. Those investment bankers say, hey, you know what you could consider doing is you could consider your own tender offer, so a self-tender offer to all the people, and basically exclude Mesa from that self-tender offer. And they say, well, we don't have the cash for that. Goldman Sachs says we can finance it with more debt. And so they say, all right, let's do that. So the board adopts this plan where essentially they say, if Boone Pickens and Mesa hits a certain threshold, what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, well, Boone, good job. You bought a bunch of shares. Now we are going to say we will buy the rest of the shares from the shareholders at a much higher price, between $70 and $75. So about $20 more per share, almost a 30% increase on the offer from Mesa. And you know what, Mesa? We're not going to buy any of your shares. We're not interested in buying any of your shares. And so that's where the discriminatory part comes into this story. And so Mesa, as you could imagine, and Boone Pickens are pretty ticked off. They had this great plan. They were going to take over Unocal, maybe sell some of its assets, bust it up, make a ton of money. And now they can't do that because the board has adopted this plan essentially where they're going to, self-tender some shares and buy some shares from the stockholders that are out there. And so they sue Unocal. And what happens is we go to court. There's basically this argument over, was this defensive measure, essentially that's what this was, by the Unocal board, was that all right? Was that justifiable? Was it okay for them to, initiate this self-tender offer after they saw that Boone Pickens was coming in? And was it okay for them to exclude Boone Pickens and Mesa from that tender offer, saying we're not going to buy any of your shares at this premium, Mesa, we're just going to buy the rest? And so that's the question before the court. And the court essentially answers the question in the affirmative and says, yes, that was fine. That was okay. They put some caveats on it. They create a rule, this is kind of the standard rule for takeover defenses. And so they say, first we're going to look to the board, and we got to make sure that they're acting with the primary purpose to, in good faith, that they're not just trying to entrench themselves and keep control of this company for no good reason, just for their own selfish reasons. We've got to make sure this is done in good faith. We've got to make sure that the stockholders are the people who are driving this self-tender offer or this defensive measure in general. So that is kind of the overarching cloud, the philosophy that overrides this decision. And they essentially say, you can't use any draconian means available to thwart a takeover. But we're going to put this rule in that says that in some instances, yes, you can do things to thwart a takeover. First, the board needs to have a reasonable perception of a threat. And they say here, there's a reasonable perception of a threat, right? Because Boone Pickens is a known corporate raider, a known green mailer. This guy wants to take companies over. He does it for like a living. We see it all the time. So yeah, this is a credible threat. And you know why else this is a credible threat? Because this is a coercive two-tier tender offer, right? The first group is going to want to sell their shares quickly so they get cashed out, so they don't just get some junk unsecured bond from Boone Pickens, right? And so, yeah, this is a reasonable threat. I mean, there's a real chance that Mesa is going to be successful in this takeover. So, the first prong of the test is satisfied. The second is the board's response proportional to the threat? And, that's essentially answered with the first, is saying this was a legitimate threat. There's a coercive two-tier tender offer. And so this discriminatory self-tender offer, yeah, it was proportional because, yeah, Boone Pickens was going to do it. And he's done it before. He's going to do it again. And this coercive tender offer made this thing look like a real deal threat to the company's existence. So they say, yeah, it's proportional. So you have to have a reasonable perception of a threat, and your response has to be proportional if you're a board trying to thwart a takeover attack, essentially. So if you're going to put up a defense against the takeover. You think about this generally. It is a bit paternalistic, right? There might have been some people that wanted to sell their shares to Boone Pickens at $55 and say, see ya, and they don't care. But the court's going to allow the board to kind of take over and watch over the stockholders. And so you might query, is that the correct thing to do? Really, is it the board's job to be the parent of the stockholders? And then the other question is, maybe a bit more devious here is, this board, is going to put up this self-tender offer for $75, right? If Mesa hits this certain threshold. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to make it so people like Mesa don't ever even want to try and buy stock from these shareholders in the first place. And so it's going to essentially, put up a wall against all tender offers, even ones that might be good, might be fair to the shareholders. Sure, there's this test. But if they put in this defensive measure and they can argue that there's reasonable threats and that it's proportional, well, we might be preventing stockholders from actually getting the value that they want, or from selling the corporation or selling their stock in the corporation as they would wish. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.